Hello, everyone. I am Martha E. Grady, or Meg. I am an assistant professor in mechanical engineering at the University of Kentucky. My proposal, titled Mechanical Mechanisms of Biofilm Survival on Implant Surfaces, is funded by the Biomechanics and Mechanobiology program within CMMI. These are my NSF career writing tips. A little disclaimer up front: for as many people as you have met as a faculty member so far, you will find that many different perspectives on how to write a winning or successful NSF Career Award proposal. So these are my tips. This is my perspective on what I think made me successful this go. This was my second attempt, so I'll have a little bit of information on that. So my outline here is working on your proposal draft, creating an overview figure that will stick, formatting that allows reviewers to breathe, but also locate information quickly, an educational section that is impactful, a background section that will address why it is included in the first place. And I want to talk specifically about the informal peer review stage. So something I encourage all junior faculty to do with their proposals, but really devote some significant amount of time to informal peer review while you work on this career award proposal. And some revise and resubmit tips that I think were helpful from my perspective. So working on your proposal draft, this came from a core belief that I held in 2019, so 2 years ago, right before, as I was submitting my first try, that I'm good enough without the grant. I think it's important for all of us to know that an NSF Career Award is not necessary and sufficient for tenure. You can get tenure without it, and you can get one and not merit tenure at your institution. That's an important part of our perspective on how we think about our career trajectory and what's important to us. Another thing that helped me write a proposal that I believed in was writing out of confidence. This is something I want to do with my career, funded or not, because it's something that I want to do with my career, and having that confidence, it really helped me write a good proposal and really believe in what I was doing. So how do you implement a strategy? So first, I'm going to take you to submit early. Create a timeline, print it, stick it in front of your face at your desk. If you're working from home, put it somewhere at home. If you're working from your office, put it at your office. If you're working from both, do both. Start with setting your submit early date. So I think this year, July 26th is the NSF deadline. Many of us have institutional deadlines ahead of that. Submit earlier than your internal deadline. So I would even suggest submitting it to your Office of Grants and Contracts as early as the 16th of July, and then work your way backwards. So set that date. There used to be a certain number of PowerPoint slides that had data, and it had a different average for depending on what date the proposal was submitted. And of early submitters, a higher percentage were funded than later or on time, day of submitters. So think about that, because we all know that the underlying mechanism is a part of that confidence and knowing, okay, it's ready. It's not really about the date in which you submit. There's that underlying factor there, but set an early submission date and then work backwards. So what are some of those components? Well, the first one is programmatic fit. If you haven't talked to your program officer, create a one-page that will summarize your project and your proposal. Maybe include an overview figure, maybe not at this early stage. Talk with your program officer about fit for that program. You don't want to go all the way through to submission and not really know if you're fit for that program. Create your overview figure. Now, I'm going to stress an overview figure. Not every proposal has one, but I would say a lot of them have at least a figure that reviewers can point to during discussion when they think about or remind themselves of what your proposal is about. So think about a figure that has somewhere up front in your proposal that during discussion, reviewers are going to flip to and say, oh, that's right, this proposal is about X. So think about that figure. Send between your overview figure and a full draft is a lot of time, but set a deadline and make sure you send your proposal draft at least to your proposal development office at your institution. They're great for this early stage. Incorporate edits and then expand. So draft exchange with another colleague in another institution, maybe inside or outside of your field. Give each other feedback to help each other be competitive on the market. And incorporate edits, and then send to my sizzle expert. So someone that you know who has been really successful with grants, send them your most polished version of your proposal and say, does this sizzle? Does it have that sizzle to it? And then submit early. So create a timeline. It could be like this. It could have more, a better breakdown of components, but create a timeline, print it, and then stick it in front of your face as you work on this proposal. Now, some of you are going to try to work on too many proposals at one time. My suggestion is to focus on the career award proposal solely, if you can. If you are able to, spend the time to develop that. I think a colleague of mine once said it takes about 100 hours to write a proposal. So think about breaking that down into smaller chunks. Are you really able to focus your time to write more proposals than that? Maybe earlier up until May, but June and July, pretty much your proposal writing time should be focused here. That's my suggestion. Also, as you work on your proposal draft, think about getting together with other colleagues to form a writing group. So if you can meet regularly, weekly or multiple times a week to work on writing and drafting your proposal, that accountability is really helpful. It was really helpful to me as I had a writing group last year. The overview figure. Sketch it. I like to sketch it on paper and then draft it in something like Illustrator. I've seen PowerPoint designs. Others have paid for artists to help create overview figures. It's not necessary. It does need to be informative. It does need to remind reviewers of what your proposal is about. And there are a couple different perspectives you can take. You can have an overview figure that focuses on the research objectives, which is what I did. You can have a overview figure that also includes the integration of your education components with your research objectives. That's fine too. It's not required. You don't have to have an overview figure that integrates visually the research and educational components, but your proposal does need to address the integration of the two. So you want to make sure that you have a really tight section somewhere else that has that integration of research with education. If, for example, like mine, you choose to have your overview figure focus on your research objectives. So some other successful components of this overview figure is to make it make sense with your aims or objectives. So outlining your objectives, outlining your aims. If you use numerical, use numerical in your figure. Make sure that you have some components of color in there and some visually appealing items as well. Formatting. It's crazy to think that formatting actually matters, but it does. That white space is so important. So if you have your proposal development office, a staff member saying, hey, you might need a break here, it's really important that you listen to that kind of feedback. The white space is so important, but you think, I gotta remove then like 2 sentences from this place. It's fine. Remove 2 sentences. You can be more succinct, make it a challenge to yourself. Can I write technically, and can I write concisely? So don't ignore any of those comments where it's just a lot of text and not a lot of mental breaks, and make sure you break that up. Think about a visual that should be a visual marker, for example, a figure per page. So about one visual marker per page. It doesn't necessarily need to be a figure, but think about some type of visual marker that will break up some of the just black on white text. Space before and after section headers are important if you want them to see your section headers. Make sure the outline numbering makes sense. So if you were to take away the whole proposal and just write the outline numbering, does that numbering and that formatting make sense, and is it consistent? Those things are really helpful as a reviewer is trying to find certain sections within your proposal. So some of my extra suggestions is make sure you include rationale for each objective. So incorporating the word rationale is really helpful, I think, to writing a good objective. So why do I need this objective? What purpose does it serve towards my overall goal? So it's incorporating it. It's making sure that your proposal is cohesive enough. All the elements kind of go together. So the rationale, how does this objective integrate with all of the other objectives, and how does it integrate with the overall goal of the project? Preliminary data for each objective. Now, before you jump at me with I'm a new investigator, I'm not going to have sufficient preliminary data for every objective. Well, think about it in terms of feasibility. So if there's already some established set of data in your field that shows or demonstrates feasibility, it doesn't necessarily need to be preliminary data for each objective developed by your lab, as long as there is some establishment of independence that you can demonstrate already. You don't need to demonstrate in every single objective, but you do need to show some feasibility, and then explain to me why you incorporated that preliminary data or preliminary study. So if it's from other investigators, you say, why was this study written into your proposal? What does it demonstrate? So it answers the reviewer's question of, why are you showing me this? Why should I care? And a good way to address that is to remember, what is the conclusions that you drew from that preliminary study, and how is that related to your proposed work? So again, it could be feasibility, or it could be, it showed that this factor that many investigators thought would, show a big increase or a big influence on something I'm going to measure, did not. Therefore, it leads me to investigate these other factors instead. That's just one example for formatting. Background section. Long background sections are a pain to read through. So my advice is to limit to 2 to 3 pages, and make sure you include a figure or two or several. Background sections, if they are just 5 pages of black text on white page, it's just such a pain. Nobody wants to read that. You probably don't even want to read it. So think about putting yourself into the reviewer's shoes and say, the reviewer is going to ask, why are you telling me this information? Why do I need to know this background information? Why are you telling me this? So some examples could be, you're identifying a critical gap in the literature that should be filled. Make sure you have that somewhere in there. This is a critical gap in the literature. This project will fill this gap by X. You could be identifying factors that must be carefully measured because they have a strong influence on your work. So if you're saying X, Y, and Z are going to affect A, B, and C, therefore X, Y, and Z are going to be the focus of objective 2. Great, excellent. Lastly, another example is the technique that you're employing works for what you want it to work for, and you are an expert at it. So this is a great place to add your own references or references to your own work. So if you're going to use an advanced technique to study something and you have a little bit of that in your background section, think about why it's important to talk about that in the background section. Well, If you're going to use a highly sophisticated technique, you want to demonstrate that it will do what you want it to do, and you're an expert in knowing how to do it. And then lastly, notice there's no color figure on this slide. It is kind of boring. It's the one slide I didn't put any color or figure on, and you can tell it's just a little lackluster. So it's just an example of why it's important to have a little bit of a visual marker throughout your proposal. Education components. So education is the business we are in. So we are all employed by institutions of higher learning. Some of us might be more teaching focused, some of us might be more research focused, but we're all in the business of education. So these components are important. And if you're not really sure the educational activities or the emphasis on an education in an NSF career proposal is right for you, that's okay. Again, an NSF career award is not necessary and sufficient for tenure. If that's not the flavor of the kind of science that you do, that's fine. There are other mechanisms to go after if education is not necessarily, or educational activities specifically, are not necessarily your thing. But if they are, and you're here and you're listening to the career award talks, then you probably want to educate, the next generation. Or the public could also be one of your emphasis areas. So my suggestion is if you have sections called education and you have a section called broad impacts, that together these should be about 4 to 5 pages of your proposal. So don't rush over the integration of education and research components. And then don't forget to discuss the broad impacts of your science within the field, as well as the broad impacts of your science on society. Those are also areas that bring with it broad impact. Because we often combine those sections, we tend to think we can only have broad impact through our educational activities, but that's not necessarily true. The science that we're doing within our laboratories have an impact on the field and then also have an impact on society. So make sure you address those things. It will increase and improve the impact of your proposal. A question we get a lot is, do my educational activities need to be complex, sophisticated, and novel? No, but there's a little asterisk there. If they happen to be, if making them more complex or more sophisticated or more novel would improve the impact, then yeah, sure, why not? But often the best educational activities are the ones that you want to do anyway because they align with your career path and your research. So activities that you're like, I don't care if this is funded, I want to do this anyway because I know that it's impactful. Those are the things that you want to include in your type of proposal. When you get reviews back and things like novelty, complexity, sophistication within the educational activity section are cited within the reviews, think about, are these activities important to me and why? Are they impactful? Why? Why are they impactful? Well, you say, well, students will learn something. They'll get something out of it. Why? Why will they get something out of it? And what's the usefulness of getting something out of this? So think about downstream, what does impact really look like for truly educating trainees or students? So for example, would providing trainees or students with skills needed in today's workforce? So if there's a skills gap in your particular area, does your educational activities address this skills gap? And can you cite literature on workforce preparation to validate the need for an investment to close that skills gap? And then think about, can I cite literature? What does the literature say in areas related to educational activities, especially if you're proposing new activities or you're proposing to do activities that are tried and true? Why are they tried and true? Who says that they're tried and true? So think about, if you're doing educational activities that may lack novelty, hit your reviewers with impactfulness. Maybe this isn't novel, but it is highly effective and highly impactful. And that's fine too. We're looking for broad impact. So think about activities that are important to you that you would want to do anyway, because it integrates really well with your career path and your research. And then it can be sometimes about the way that you package those things. If they are impactful and they are important to you and they do align with your career and research goals, then it may be about convincing the reviewers that they're impactful. And so find some ways to connect with that in the text. The informal peer review stage that I mentioned. So I had 11 different individuals review my career proposal across 2 years. So sometimes it was same people 1 year to the next. Sometimes I would drop someone and pick someone else up. There were 2 staff at the proposal development office at my institution and then 9 academics. 6 were at UK, 3 within the College of Engineering, and 3 outside my home college. Then there were 3 others at other institutions, 2 career award winners, 1 from my target program, and another junior faculty also submitting the career. So what's my bottom line? Get lots of eyes on the proposal. Get peers and successful, mid or senior level faculty who are going to give you in-depth reviews. So I put a figure here on this slide, just copy and pasted from my prior drafts, and lots of comments. So that's what you want to see. You don't want to get your proposals back from your colleagues and there's 1 or 2 comments. It probably means they didn't have enough time to review your proposal. So find those that are committed to your success that will review your proposal and give you those comments. And you've got to grow thick skin, right? So to get 11 different people to tell you, adamantly that this section should be removed and somebody else is very adamant that this section needs to be bolded, you've got to wrestle with those different opinions and those different perspectives, and that process will help you come up with a better proposal. So get lots of eyes on it, get detailed feedback that's going to make your stomach churn, and then work through it. So the revise and resubmit stage, take a few minutes to digest the reviews before firing off angry emails. That's my number one when we get reviews back. Then after a certain amount of time, it could be a month, it could be a couple weeks, meet with your program officer and try to read between the lines of that panel summary. What were the critical flaws versus flaws? And then my strategy is for each comment to compose a list of how or if to respond. I start with my visceral response of, you're an idiot, you didn't read my proposal, which is not true, but that's my visceral response. And then I move down to some actionable items and some actionable steps. So in red are actual comments I got back on my first round. So the project does not go beyond state of the art. That's ouch. It is unclear how outcomes from different experiments would integrate. Idealized culture conditions do not represent any realistic application. Ouch. The potential of the project to contribute to or to make broader impact to the field is limited. Double ouch. So some of those are critical flaws, and I would say some are. One, the culture conditions one is probably a flaw, but pretty easily addressed. So I have in black there how I address those. This proposal goes beyond state of the art by blah, 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 blah. And then in the preceding sentences, I defined what state of the art in the field is. What is the state of the art in, biofilm elasticity measurements? Then I say this proposal goes beyond state of the art by doing blah, blah, blah. I focus a third objective on the integration of all of my experiments into an overall framework. And, with the culture conditions, those of you who do cell work, this is a common comment we get back about how do you culture cells and bacteria in ways that do represent realistic applications. Well, not every experiment can go straight to an in vivo environment. So instead, what I decided to do is explore more surface conditioning and altered environments that would move towards mimicking an in vivo environment rather than trying to go straight in vivo was not realistic for me. And then the broader impacts question. So I reorganized my broad impact section and I included the impact on the field and the impact on society, but really that was a packaging. I didn't change my educational activities between my two submissions. I changed a lot of my packaging and really showed the reviewers how impactful what I was doing both in the science realm as well as in the education realm was on the field and on society. And then my last suggestion is to make it sizzle. So make sure you send your proposal to others who are going to tell you it's got the sizzle or let's make it sizzle. And I wish you all of the best in your submissions.